Brrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. We are the people who do this show. It is a great privilege of mine to be joined today by the Domestic Cricket Broadcaster of the Year. An award handed down. Was it handed down by the ECB, Adam Collins? For it is you. You are it. You are he. You are that broadcaster.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's the Cricket Writers Club ECB annual awards that they do, which is nice. It's I sort of think that awards can be a bit of a lottery from time to time, especially in the media. But yeah, this meant a fair bit because I speak with the accent that I speak with, and I'm living in the country that I live in, and those two things aren't necessarily compatible. But obviously what I'm saying is sensible enough that those making the decision saw fit to give me that gong. And it's, in the name of Christopher Martin Jenkins, which is pretty cool as well. I spent a lot of time reading books that CMJ had written last year when Norcross and I were making the Calling the Shots documentary, and of course learning about CMJ's story, which isn't a gazillion miles away from the sort of thing that you and I try and do, Jeff. That is sort of be journalists and be writers, but also broadcast and talk about the game. So the fact that it's named after him is special, and a lot of lovely comments yesterday from people around the cricketing world, but especially our Final Word community. So thank you for everyone that got in touch and said nice things. It does mean a lot.
I just heard in the background down my headphones Winnie screaming down the hallway in a very enthusiastic style. Just before we started the show, Adam was off frame doing something else, and all I could hear was Rachel saying, no. And I just had to fill in the gaps as to what was happening in the hallway outside the room. So she's just learnt at the Collins end.
She's just learnt that that what pinching is. And I don't think it's sort of meant in an aggressive way, but she knows it will get our attention, and she knows how to pull Rachel's hair as well. So that was the no. Lucky she wasn't able to do that 12 months ago when, like I say, making the aforementioned Calling the Shots documentary. And it couldn't have happened if she had been crawling all over me. So anyway, a really nice start to the week yesterday with all of that, and onwards and upwards. And I suppose we were celebrating our own little milestone this morning, Jeff, when we ticked over 2 million people having listened to the Final Word since we moved to Bad Producer. So that's about 2 years since we went full throttle with weekly shows. It's kind of hard to remember what it was like before that, but we would do a few episodes here, a few episodes there. We'd often be commissioned by an organisation to work with them through a series or something like that. Yeah. And eventually we're like, we actually want to make a real go of this, which means being a weekly podcast. And that's when we found Jay, or when Jay agreed to take us on. I'd already worked with him a little bit as part of the Greatest Season It Was projects. But and everything changed for us then. And we've had the chance to build this show in all sorts of ways that anyone listening would probably be familiar with. But Jeff, the bit that stands out is the second million compared to the first million. I think we've added our second million in about 9 or 10 months or something like that.
Yeah, second comes right after first, but the second was a lot faster, so that's nice. That shows that things are going in the right direction. Yeah, the first season we did in 2015, because it was in England, it was proper BBC style, like the original Office, 6 episode season. That's it, you're done, you're out. Quality only. And now we've moved into more of a sort of New Girl type arrangement with 28 episode seasons or whatever it is, and just keep them coming. But we've been having some fun doing it, so thank you to everyone who's in the 2 million, and I guess it's 3 next.
Yeah, it will be, and presumably 3 will come straight after 2 in quicker fashion again, which is cool. And I suppose now that we're making more daily shows, that's only natural. But yeah, the early days of the Final Word, I don't think we went to calling it the Final Word until season 2. I think season 1 we were just known as the Ashes Cricket Podcast or something like that. Yep. It was something very generic when we were travelling around the UK using BBC studios. We had a bunch of great guests in that first season as well, where we would have like sort of a 4-person conversation around the Test match. Round table chat around the Test match that had just been completed. So pretty different format now, but all part of the Final Word arc. I wonder how many eps we're up to. It must be in the order of 300 or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I could tell
shitloads
you.
is the word, I think.
What was the White Line Wireless statistical category was an MST, a metric shit ton. He's made an MST of runs in this Sheffield Shield season. So I think it's something like 120 plus of the main weekly shows, 38 story times. I know that because the number's in the title. And then, I don't know, 100 and something other daily shows as well. So, yeah, we'd up towards that. But anyway, let's talk about cricket and not about cricket podcasts because we've got a few things that we're talking about and not talking about today. The most important is the interview that we've got in the second half of the show, our interview about Brazilian cricket. Which may not be a form of cricket that many of you are all of that au fait with, but we got put onto this tale by Alistair Townsend, who's one of our listeners. So we spoke with Roberta Moretti, who's the Brazilian women's captain, and Matt Featherstone, who's sort of got the ball rolling about 20 years ago with cricket in Brazil in its modern incarnation. And we've just finished recording a little look behind the curtain. We already know what they said. A really interesting chat with those two.
Yeah, and as soon as Alistair sent me a note saying you should do this story on the final word, I was all in because it's a great yarn. I mean, we touched on it last year when they gave the women professional contracts ahead of the men. It kind of came from nowhere, and we didn't know much about this story, but it's totally worth it. There's so much good stuff going on in that specific pocket of Brazil where they've got cricket up and about to the point where Matt Featherstone lives and works. Cricket is bigger than football, which just seems remarkable when, I mean, we know what football means to Brazil, but they've been able to grow the game so quickly that cricket is leaving a real mark. So onwards and upwards for them. And yeah, stick around for that chat because it's a beauty.
Well, it's also about seeing more of the detail because when I travelled in Brazil, I met a lot of people who were really frustrated with the football thing. That that becomes the stereotype of their country, the same as, oh, did you know the cricket's like a religion in India? And you're like, yep, there are heaps of Indians who don't give a shit about cricket. Like there are heaps who don't have time, and there are ones who do, but they don't like it anyway. The sort of generalisation that, the whole country's mad for it, everyone's playing football in their sleep. It is not the case. It is popular, but popular does not mean everybody. What we're not talking about on the show today, England and India in the T20s, because we're doing the daily show for that on YouTube. We sort of executive decisioned... I could just say decided. We decided not to put those as audio pods on the feed because we've done a lot of daily shows lately and weren't entirely sure what people would want. But if you want those, they're on YouTube. If you want to find out the detail of what we reckon of what was going on in those games, and we'll get back to the Australian domestic stuff next week because we're kind of mid-Shield games at the moment and all the rest of it. So it's all ongoing.
This is also on YouTube, as was our weekly episode last week with Mark Butcher. It's kind of nice in a way just to come back to the 2 million thing for a sec. That it was the Mark Butcher episode that tipped us over the edge there, because that was a beautiful conversation. Listening back to it, Mark was so sort of open with us about his relationship with his dad and other parts of his life as well. So if you haven't heard that, go back in the feed or watch it on YouTube. I'm wearing the same jumper that I wore for the first T20 wrap-up a couple of days ago, which generated plenty of attention. Rachel's mum knitted me this. It's an Aaron jumper. I didn't, and it's huge. Oh. It's a classic winter English thing. The patterns through it. Jumper? Well, I gather it's to do with, it's ARAN. I gather it's to do with the type of pattern through the middle. And I learnt another thing too is that these types of patterned jumpers, going back a long time, and I can't quite place when or where this was, but there was a time when these types of jumpers would all have different indentations on them, so that if you got lost at sea, I think it's if you got lost at sea, anyway, if you died an unpleasant death, they could work out who you are based on the pattern of the jumper that was made for you.
Yikes. So it was like more comfortable dog tags.
Yeah, something like that. Might have been
snug winter dog tags.
Yeah, but you can, if you're watching YouTube already, you'll know the kit I've got on. But those YouTube videos for the T20s have been going ever so nicely. Thank you for watching them. We're nearing a milestone on YouTube as well, which is crazy considering we started the channel like 2.5 months ago. But that's been an unexpected success of the pod so far this year. Yeah,
that's going to hit the million fairly shortly. But the Aaron, it made me think of Aaron Brindle actually first, who was used to be a England women's cricketer. who's always one whose name I enjoyed because an Aaron Brindle, it sounds like the sort of breed of a fancy horse that a really rich English person would own. You know, oh, what kind is she? Oh, she's an Aaron Brindle. Oh, lovely. Look at her gait. It's a very elegant gait. You know, that's the kind of thing I can imagine.
She made a comeback, didn't she, Aaron Brindle? She came back for the first edition of the Kia Super League in 2016 and won the thing under the captaincy of Charlotte Edwards. That's another thing, by the way. Sorry to be indulgent, but the last thing about that award yesterday that I think was nice is that none of it would have happened without domestic women's cricket. Just want to lay a marker there. So I doubt I would have done much commentary in the England season through COVID and whatever else, but on the back of the Surrey Middlesex London Cup women's game, which was the first domestic game played in England after COVID. Very biosecure conditions. There was no fans or anything like that. But that led towards working with Middlesex, which led towards working with Sky during the Bob Willis Trophy. And, of course, I got to do some Test match special as well for the Australia one-dayers and T20s. But it all comes back to that domestic women's scene over here, which barely existed as far as a product that people were watching on TV or listening to on radio until 2016. So I thought I'd mention that. So it all started with the women's game, which we've been so heavily invested in over, well, as long as we've covered cricket.
Yep. Very nicely observed. So let's get into some cricket, and we have to look at a Test match win for Afghanistan against Zimbabwe. They didn't do so well in the first Test of this series, but boy, did they come back strong in the second. In the UAE at the Sheikh Zayed Stadium, one of the top 10 stadiums named after a sheikh, for my money. Afghanistan got up by 6 wickets, but it wasn't just that they won, it's that they batted really big in Test cricket. And that's, it's always been the thing with Afghanistan is through their progression, through the limited overs formats, they've been a team with a lot of good spin bowlers before they had a lot of good batting, and they tended to struggle to chase targets and struggle to put up convincing scores, but they were a good fielding and bowling team. So to see them come out and go huge, 545 for 4, I mean, pretty friendly batting conditions, but nonetheless, you've still got to get them on the board. Afghanistan had one Test century before this match. Rahmat Shah had made the country's first ever Test 100. They added 2 more in this game. Asghar Afghan got the second one. He's the guy who we remember so well, who's was the captain, who's been around since the very start of this Afghanistan team's journey as a proper, as a cricket side going up through the ICC rankings, 16, 17, 18 years ago, that he was first getting involved. Got pushed out as captain just before the 2019 World Cup due to some politics. He's back in as captain now. He made 164. Hashmatullah Shahidi made an even 200, and at the point that they declared. So within their first 3 Test centuries, they've got a Test double century. No other country's done it faster than that. The West Indies did the same. Their third Test 100 was a double. It took England 38 Test hundreds before they got to a double ton. So, they've done something really remarkable.
Yeah, and I love the response to Hashmatullah's double 100. It obviously meant so much to him, having batted all the way through 160 overs. And then Ibrahim Sadran, who came ever so close to getting a Bannerman for himself, or getting the Bannerman, I should say. And we'll come to that later in the ep, actually. But he made 72. He's a 19-year-old, so someone to watch sort of as we observe the Afghanistan team in years to come. So it's not just that group that brought them. And this was a little bit of the island story for a while. They reached Test status with the golden generation who'd been there largely since 2005 and gone all the way through until 2018 when they played that first Test match. But there was a question about what was coming through, and that's the next challenge for Irish cricket. The encouraging thing here for Afghanistan is that Ibrahim Zadran is reflective of the fact that there is a generation coming straight through beneath the experienced players who've been there through the associate days, and they need that in order to keep regenerating and remaining sustainable as a competitive team into the future. Yep.
I liked the way the Asghar Afghan innings came about. It was that sort of block bash style where he got to 50 and then immediately hit 6-4-4. Then he blocked for a while. Then he took 16 off an over from Victor Nyauchi to raise his century. And they were all those big leg side clouts. At Abu Dhabi, it was very reminiscent of Misbah-ul-Haq in 2014. I was watching that watching the 100 come up live, and it just kept bringing back Misbah taking down Steve Smith when he made that 100 off 56 balls. But that was exciting to see, and then the way they just batted long into the next day. And then it was poor old Rashid Khan, who who's had some injuries, some finger injuries and whatnot, bowled nearly 100 overs in the test match. And had to back it up because they decided to enforce the follow on. Asghar Afghan, the captain, was like, "Yeah, no worries. We've bowled out Zimbabwe for 287. We picked 3 bowlers basically. Rashid Khan's bowled 36 and a half overs, taken 4 for 138, conceding nearly half the runs. Let's enforce the follow on." So they did. Got him 7 down for 142, and then there's a partnership of 187, and he just had to keep bowling and keep bowling.
Yeah, I can see what they were thinking in terms of having racked up that huge score and having such an imposing first innings lead. Why not sort of go for the kill? But yeah, the way the team was balanced, it meant that there was always going to be so much work on the shoulders of Rashid Khan. It wasn't lost upon many people that he bowls, I think, is it 88 overs or 86 overs in the IPL if he plays every game and bowls the full allotment, and bowled 99 here in a game, 99, just under 100, and we'll come to the statistical relevance of that in a tick. But yeah, in that follow-on, Zimbabwe, quite outstanding. Sean Williams, the skipper, made a century in the first test and an unbeaten 151 in the second. A guy who made his international debut all the way back in 2005, and we saw how good he was at the 2015 World Cup, Jeff, and at different times he's been in the team and then out of the team for long stretches. He's played county cricket as well, but now very much leading the Zimbabwean team and to victory in the first test, not so much here, but there was nothing around him. It felt like that they were on track for a huge thumping innings defeat, and then there was the stand that changed everything.
Yeah, Donald Turapano, a bowler, let's make no bones about it. It comes in and just bats long with Williams, ended up making 95, got out just short of 100, but that actually took them to a reasonable lead. It got them 107 in front, and you would not be shocked at all to see Afghanistan, a team that's played 5 test matches, 5 or 6,
about that. Yep.
Entire existence. You wouldn't be shocked to see a team like that fall over, like Ireland did against England at Lords at the end of that test match. You wouldn't be shocked to see them not be able to chase a 3-figure score in the 4th innings with a bit of pressure on. But that was really the best sign out of the match, to my eye, was that they didn't have a problem. They closed it out. They lost a wicket early, and that still didn't rattle them. Got most of the way there, and then lost 3 wickets right when they were about to get over the line. So it wasn't like they were 4 down and heading into trouble. It was, the last 3 were within 10 runs of the target, and they weren't going to fall short at that point.
Yeah, and had to hold their nerve as well. Remember, in the second innings, 148.5 overs they sent down. Rashid Khan, 62.5 of those, 17 maidens, 7 for 137, worth repeating. If you're chasing 108 in those circumstances, and that's the beauty of Test cricket, isn't it? They make 545 the first time around, but having to return to get 108, having spent, I don't know how many overs they bowled for in the first inning. I think it was about 90. So they spent pretty much 2.5, 3 days in the field, and they're left with that nagging total in the penultimate and final session of the Test match. So, and I love the fact that it was Ramat Shah there who held it together, an unbeaten 58. To get them through to a 1-1 result in the series. And I've got to say, Jeff, I mean, there was obviously a lot of attention on this test as it was reaching its conclusion, a lot of attention during that incredible partnership in Zimbabwe's second innings. And the fact that it was on live television here and we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago meant that so many people were drawn to it. I'm glad that now a lot of people seem to have taken up the cause of why isn't there an organised structure for Test cricket for teams outside of the World Test Championship? I mean, 9 teams sit inside of that, which means Zimbabwe, Afghanistan and Ireland, the 3 full member nations of the ICC, so Test playing nations who currently aren't part of that structure, so ad hoc Test matches as good as they can kind of hope for. Okay, why don't we add Nepal? Why don't we add Holland? Why don't we add Scotland and have a second division of 6 teams? I saw Andrew Nixon, the great campaigner for Associate Cricket and journalist, talking about this on social media, and it makes loads of sense to me. They don't need to play as much Test cricket as the other first division of 9 to make it worthwhile. They just need a structure, and if they do, it'll make days like this even more important.
Well, I mean, literally the only reason that something like that wouldn't happen and isn't happening is because of the money that it costs those countries to stage test matches, and because they don't have that money to spare, they're not allocated that. The sort of Test cricket fund from the ICC doesn't exist, and we've talked about it a million times, but the allocation of revenue between the handful of big countries that take most of it and everybody else who gets the rest means that it's impossible practically to stage those. But that seems like a really obvious thing that could and should be happening, where you could be helping develop Test cricketers. You get better at Test cricket by playing it, and teams get more able to cope with it by doing it. And Rashid Khan will be sore after 99 overs, but the next time he goes out to play in a Test match, he'll have the confidence of having that performance under his belt.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just all about, they're still going to play Test cricket, but it's that ad hoc nature of it, which means that it doesn't quite feel, it doesn't feel as, meaningful is the wrong word. It still feels meaningful, but if it had a structure around it, even if one of those top 9 spots in the WTC was up for grabs, if there was some promotion relegation, I don't think it's impossible to find a structure where this can work. And we've talked about 2 divisions of Test cricket before. This isn't about 2 divisions where there's sort of some secondary status. It's more just like allowing these countries to play each other with greater regularity, and it'll have far more riding on it, which should mean, as you say, the standard rises over time rather than, you say Afghanistan might have played 5 Test matches. Well, how many have Zimbabwe played in the last 10 years? Now, sure, a lot of that can be attributed to their internal governance and the cliff they went off financially. But still, that is a problem, and they are a full member nation of the ICC. So, speaking of the 99.2 overs that Rashid Khan bowled, Jeff, I thought you would like to know that it is the most overs bowled in a Test match since Morley bowled 113.5 against Zimbabwe back in 1998. And the most ever, 129, that's 6 ball overs. It was Sonny Ramadan at Edgbaston against England in 1957, which is the Test match that we've talked about a few times on this feed, both in story time but also in calling the shots, because that was the first ever Test match broadcast on what was then known for the first time as Test Match Special. So if you want to learn more about that test, you can do so deeper in the feed. But yeah, it gives it some context. This was a massive, mighty shift from Rashid Khan, and collecting match figures of 11 for a squillion over nearly 100 overs.
11 for 275 after his 99.2 overs. So, yeah, the team bowled 91 in the first innings, 149 in the second. It's like those old sort of follow-ons when Bradman was captain, and he'd bowl Ray Lindwall into the ground over 120 overs and then pop them in and make them follow on. But they used to have the rest day back then, so that made it slightly different. Anyway, for all of those overs, I think we should give Rashid Khan the coveted CBUS Super Performer of the Week. I know that he's a man who thinks about his future. The most overs bowled in the 21st century. Know when to declare and retire the way you want. That is the tagline, and he may be considering retirement from Test cricket after that workload. But if he is, he could visit cbussuper.com.au/thefinalword.
I like it. Maybe he can visit the 21st Century nightclub if it's still there down in Frankston with the revolving dance floor. Did you ever go there when you were a teenager at university? Did it ever take you in, Jeff?
I didn't make it that far. I took the train down to Frankston a few times, so that was a fairly harrowing experience on occasion. But
no, that was quite the spot. I did some campaigning down there in the 2004 election, I think it was, and we ended up at 21st Century a number of times on the revolving dance floor. No regrets.
Yeah, well, look, maybe you should have regrets about that. Who knows? That is the web address for you to go to if you want to find out about your superannuation. Who's saving money? Channel 7, they're trying to save money. They're trying to squirrel some away on the deal they agreed to with Cricket Australia. And curiously, as it links to what we've just talked about, the key piece in the negotiations, the Maltese Falcon that they're all trying to get their hands on, is a Test match against Afghanistan. Now, how likely would this have been, say, 12 months ago?
Yeah, this is a really interesting subplot to the stoush between CA and 7, and yes, we've talked about it quite a bit on the show in the last 9 months, and probably will for the next 9 months as well, given the attitude that 7 have been taking towards this in recent days. It's in the federal court this week. So an independent arbitrator came in and said independent arbiter, might be the right word, not arbitrator, came in and said that Seven were entitled to a $5.3 million discount on their fee of 82 mil. Now, the irony here, of course, is that they were originally offered 15 mil by Cricket Australia and said, you can stick that up your ass, we're going to court. And they've come back getting just over a third of that. Seven, by the way, they want a discount of 70 million out of 82. They want a fair bit more than the 5.3.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's what their original claim, according to reports, the original claim they were after. They wanted, and this, of course, is going to be taken out of the payments going forward. So they resolved the issue late last year. They did pay what they were meant to pay and so on. But whatever the discount they eventually get will be taken off their fees for next year. So if I've read this correctly, that they're after 70 and at the moment the clock's at 5.3. But where Afghanistan comes in, because that test was postponed last summer and it was meant to be part of the offering, that's now worth $3 million to Cricket Australia. So according to what went down late last week, last Friday, if that test match doesn't go ahead, then Seven get $3 extra mil as part of their discount for what happened during the COVID summer of 2020, 2021. So
the COVID summer of 1920. Yes, that's right. The heady days after the war, things were looking up, but then COVID struck.
It was a summer we were talking about on Storytime just last week with Roy Park, wasn't it? Anyway, so where this got to was that it's in federal court and the stoush continues, as I mentioned off the top. But this Afghanistan test kind of slipped us by because it has been announced by Cricket Afghanistan. In December last year, they, on their own terms, said they were going to come to Australia for a test match before the Ashes of this coming summer. I missed that. You missed that. I think everybody missed that. But I assume
the CA hasn't confirmed it. So
no, but they essentially have. The Afghanistan administrators have said this is the agreement they've arrived at, and I understand it to be the case that this is going ahead. So
but
and
it
the fact that it now
by Cricket Australia.
No, but nor has the Ashes. So it's these things get announced in the fullness of time in the middle of a year. But the point here is that this test is going ahead. But if it weren't to, that's worth $3 million to Channel 7 in the current. The current, not agreement, because they're not accepting the view of the arbiter, but it goes on. So the boss of Channel 7, James Warburton, called Cricket Australia bumbling and stumbling and called the scheduling last year stupid. And Jeff, just to recap on what they mean by that, it's to do with the fact that there was no Test cricket last November, and the argument they're advancing is that the one day is coming first in that sort of coveted spot at the start of the summer is enough to justify this whole brouhaha, that if it had have been Test cricket there at the start of the summer against India, that would have been something they would have been satisfied with. It's principally due to the order of international cricket last year, but as we know, that kind of relates to a whole bunch of other stuff to do with quarantine and where the teams were preparing and where they could hub, and there was a lot going on.
What we know is that Channel 7 came up with about 16 different reasons as to why they should get a discount. And as each of those reasons became no longer current, they moved on to another reason. And so the reasons that they eventually settled on were there should have been Test cricket earlier and there wasn't. And the one-dayers came first and that wasn't fair because they were on pay TV. And also that there weren't enough Australian national players in the Big Bash.
Yes.
When there have never been Australian national players in the Big Bash, they don't play in the Big Bash because they're always playing something else, like the one-dayers that are not in November but are later in the summer, where Channel 7 apparently wanted them to be. So those were their contradictory positions. But I think the way it worked out was that the only tangible thing they could point to that they had actually lost was the Afghanistan test match. Everything else went ahead. All of the other fixtures were played. They didn't miss out on anything else. They missed out on a test match, which, had it been held in Perth as was planned, could have been over in 2 days and probably wouldn't have been a huge revenue spinner for the network that had it on, as they filled in the next 3 days with repeats of like Love Island or whatever it is that they do. So that was the position that they were in, where it's not that they actually care about that test match. That is my interpretation. It's that that was something that they could actually legitimately make a complaint about. And so, the arbitration has said, okay, well, if that doesn't happen, then you can have some more money back. But it is pretty funny that the amount they've been given is a third of the amount that they refused to accept as not being enough, given that nothing really had actually changed for them.
Yeah, and people who follow the paper trail and follow this side of it closer than us have reported and have declared that Seven want out of this big time. Like, it's an Ashes summer, sure, but even though the ratings were great, and there's this sort of contradiction as well, that we were getting press releases from Channel 7 throughout the course of the summer saying, this record broken, that record broken, extraordinary audiences watching the India-Australia series. And fair enough, too, because it was a tremendous series. I mean, people are going to watch that, as they will
their
the Ashes.
ads. Their ads for the Big Bash that said, literally said, all of the stars are coming to Australia at the same time as they were launching a court action saying there were not enough stars coming to Australia. Consistency of messaging hasn't been their strong point through this.
Yeah, so I suppose the scenario which could play out is that another free-to-air provider might be required to catch the ball in time for the Ashes. So we'll keep a watch on that, and we might get someone who's followed it closer than us, the court proceedings, to update us on the show next week. But by the way, Jeff, I'm not sure if you spotted the story.
Can we buy it?
Yeah,
Can we buy it out?
I wonder what price they would put on it.
Be a fire
the other. Well, I mean, it isn't completely outside the realms of possibility that it'll be done in a different way in the next right cycle. We see the BCCI make their own product. Could we rule out Cricket Australia doing something similar? They've made a lot of content for streaming services in the last couple of years. I mean, they've made a documentary for Amazon only last year. But anyway, I digress. There was another story I thought I'd just quickly just lay a marker for that we need to talk about in greater depth. Indian investors reportedly wanting to buy into BBL clubs, which is essentially privatising the Big Bash League. Now, there's 10 years of history here, and Dan Brettig wrote a marvellous piece in the Cricket Monthly a couple of years ago explaining why they avoided private investment at the start of all this and why it ended up being a great masterstroke of the state associations and Cricket Australia holding onto their asset. I mean, as anyone who knows anything about government would say, you can only sell an asset once. You can't flog it time and time again. There's a short-term yield from it. Where this is a bit more complicated, I suppose, is that the ACA, so the Players Union, are quite interested in private investment because they see it as potentially a new revenue stream for grassroots cricket. So there's a bit to run on this. I don't want to sort of take a hard and firm position, but I think it's the sort of thing that we should keep a close eye on at Final Word headquarters in weeks to come.
Doesn't the money they make off it go into grassroots cricket as it is? Like, isn't that the point?
Well, I think the argument would be is they can make more, right? If you're a private investor, you can make more. So I saw some back and forth on social media yesterday that this feeds into the argument that the Big Bash is somehow fundamentally broken. And that is contested territory because it rates well. As we talked about before, there's a lot of players come in from overseas and play in it. This year, after the Test matches finished, a lot of international Australian players, contrary to what Seven were pointing to, played as well. So it isn't an easy argument to advance that the whole thing's cooked. But I also understand why they might want to try and make more money out of it. But like I say, you can only sell something once. So that might be... it'll be interesting to see how the new chief executive of Cricket Australia, whoever that ends up being, addresses this issue, because James Sutherland, when he was running the show, was very much against that. That's where they arrived at, and that's all documented in Brettig's piece, which is worth a read if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Indeed. South Africa and India, the women's series that's going on in India at the moment, the South Africans have bounced back and won the thing. It was 1-1 last time we talked. They're missing Dane van der Kerk, their fearless leader. They're missing Chloe Tryon, the biggest hitter in the game. And they've racked up a couple of big run chases back-to-back, one on Duckworth-Lewis and then a bigger one that didn't involve any rain assistance whatsoever, ran down 266 that India set them without any problems at all, really. It's been a pretty remarkable showing.
What a fantastic story this is. South African cricket, women's cricket's on the rise. I mean, yes, interest declared. I've been following them very closely and, a huge fan of their story for a long period of time. But under Laura Woolvart, they've been able to win the third and fourth match of the series. In the third, as you say, it was affected by Duckworth-Lewis. But Lizelle Lee, 132 not out off 131 balls, if you don't mind. She jumps to number one in the ODI batter rankings, overtaking Tammy Beaumont, who went up to number one after the New Zealand series. So that was the third one-dayer, which I should add, Mithali Raj passed 10,000 international runs for India. Just the second woman to reach that milestone, joining Charlotte Edwards, who finished with 10,273 runs in 316 international innings. Well, Mithali's only played 291 innings for her 10,000 and change, 10 test matches, 213 one-day internationals and 89 T20s. So, and then in the fourth one-day, she went beyond 7,000. She went beyond 7,000 one-day runs, and she's the first woman to achieve that at a remarkable average of 50.5, 7 centuries, and an additional 54 scores over 50. So at age 38, she's not done yet. So that's the Indian story, I suppose, all around Mithali Raj. But for South Africa, in that fourth one-dayer, India rack up 266. Poonam Raut made an unbeaten century, which was their main contributor. Harmanpreet Kaur made 54, Mithali Raj 45. But then South Africa go and chase it down fearlessly. They won with 8 balls to spare, and it was so consistent. They win by 7 wickets. Lizelle Lee 69, Laura Woolvart 53, Laura Goodall 59 not out, her highest score in international cricket. Mignon de Pree 61, and Marizanne Kapp finished the job with an unbeaten 22. So a true team effort, and the equal 5th biggest chase in women's one-day internationals, the biggest successful chase for South Africa. And, I mean, they're talking a big game, Jeff. After that game, they're like, we're going to win this 4-1, and then we're going to go and win the World Cup. I mean, fair enough. I mean, they've got a very strong bowling lineup with Shabim Ismail picked up her 150th one-day wicket in the third game, I think it was. Aya Bonga Kaka has got some serious pace. Marizanne Kapp. They bring back Danae van Niekerk. They bring back Chloe Tryon. There is definitely something about this South African team. They came so close to making the T20 World Cup final 12 months ago. They're building so well to win away against India. Yeah, no mean feat.
Yeah, and particularly I think with Woolvart at the helm, does that mean we can assume that she's decided to go with cricket because, you know, there's been this back and forth about whether she'll go and become a doctor and whether she'll keep being a cricketer, but she's continued being a cricketer for the time being. And like watching her in the Big Bash over, you know, late last year, it's not like she came out and made hundreds every time she came out, but there's just something in the way that some batters play where you know that they're a level above the players around them, and she genuinely is. Like she's still got so much upside that she can get a whole lot better, but she's got something in terms of timing and placement that most players will never have, and that exceptionalism, that distance above the next best is something that, like, I just reckon that the next 5 or 10 years could see her do incredible things if she's able to really commit to it.
Yeah, and the fact that she's got sort of big game experience. I mean, there's that World T20 campaign last year, but you go back to the 50-over World Cup. I mean, it feels like a long time ago, 2017, where
it was
we collectively fell in love with that cover drive of hers that she played so well through the course of that tournament. She was 17 then, I reckon, maybe even 16. So she's still very much in the early stages of her international journey. She might have been 18 then, because I think that's when the question about medical school first bobbed up. And then when we had her in England again the year after, playing in the bilateral series, it was touch and go. And I suppose, as you say, if she's still playing and leading her country, it would seem that cricket's won out for the time being. So, yeah, great story that they've been able to win over there. They've got one more one-dayer, which is on Wednesday, then 3 T20s after that. I would say that to the extent to which we were critical of New Zealand last week on the show and worried that they perhaps won't be competitive in a home World Cup, if you were grouping the teams together, I think that South Africa are going to be just that next level down beneath Australia, England, and maybe India possibly when we sort of frame up who might win the comp next year, which is great.
Yeah. And the other little bit of news in women's cricket was that Sarah Taylor has joined the Sussex men's team as the wicket-keeping coach. It was good to see a clip on the British news, I can't remember which channel it was, when they announced this, and they put up file footage of Kate Cross doing warm-ups instead of Sarah Taylor, kicking a football around. So when you want to announce Sarah Taylor being a cricketer, definitely get a different player kicking your football. That's how you do it. That's how file footage works. Well done.
Yeah. Hello to Kate Cross if you're listening, former guest of The Final Word. And, yeah, great news for Sarah Taylor. I interviewed her it might have been 13, 14 months ago. We did a big photo shoot down at Sussex there when she'd finished as an international, and she was doing for the magazine. I mean, not
just you and Sarah.
Just
did a big
taking
photo
photos
shoot.
of Sarah.
I sort of imagined the two of you being in there, like some sort of, I don't know, like crushed velvet divan and like, you know, draped artistically, got some grapes, you know, layered over the appropriate
There were some
areas,
artistic shots taken, but anyway, it was for the Women's Cricket Zone magazine, and which came out this week too, I should say, with some lovely writing from Vish and so on. But no, at that point in time, Sarah was sort of like obviously wanting to remain involved in the game, but didn't really know where exactly. And I'm glad that a year on that she's found her place. And I mean, why wouldn't you want Sarah Taylor seeing the next generation or aiding the next generation of wicketkeepers at your club? I mean, she's the best I've seen. Well, certainly the best I've seen in women's cricket. It's hard to necessarily make judgments next to the men because it's a very different job when you're standing up to seamers all day long. But yes, glad to see she's been retained by the game.
Yeah, indeed. I think that brings us to our own game. Would you like to play a game, Adam?
I would, Jeff.
Excellent. Let's play a game. It is called Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. The game we play with people on our Patreon page. They support the show by sending us an amount of currency. Not a normal amount, not a round number, but a different number. A number that has some relationship to cricket. And we have to work out what the number means. Fittingly, on our Brazilian cricket show, our first Nerd Pledger is a friend of the show, Andrew Gilbertson, also known as Gilbertson, the creative left-footed midfielder who has done such sterling work just behind the centre circle. The number that he sent in was, in fact, a round number. So I lied about that part because, you know, it could be a round number and a Nerd Pledge number. It's $4, so it's 400. But Andrew specifically sent us a message to say that it is a Nerd Pledge number. It means something. Now, obviously, Adam, 400 in cricket means something pretty obvious.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if we're looking at scores, there's Lara. In recent times, we've been looking at 400 in the context of Lyon v Ashwin. I'd be surprised if it were any of those three, though. I think Andy Gilbertson, who we've corresponded with a fair bit through Nerd Pledge, I reckon he'll be going to a slightly deeper level.
Okay. Well, I didn't mind the 400 because at the time he sent it, the race to 400 was on. Ashwin and Lyon were still competing for 400, so that could be one. Brian Lara breaking the world record for the second time for the highest Test score is another one. We've spoken about that on the show before about what an admirably petty individual Brian Lara was. That he set 375. That was the record for 10 years. Matthew Hayden broke it, and within 6 months, Lara had taken it back again. That's the record.
With the 400 being the slowest of the four, if I recall correctly, or something like that. He wanted that record.
Yeah, you'd be fairly tired by that point. I wish he'd gone on to 420, personally. It would have been much more entertaining. But I was thinking, okay, 400, if it's something less obvious than Lara's 400, could it be someone we were just talking about, Dane van Niekerk, who took 4 wickets for none in a tournament we were just talking about, the 2017 Women's World Cup. It is the only such haul in tests or one days for men or women where a player has taken 4 wickets for no runs. That has not happened in any other format. In men's cricket, of any international format, the best is Richie Benaud took 3 for none in Delhi in a test match. Women's ODIs, there are a couple of 3 for nones. One of them is Aaron Brendel, the very expensive kind of horse. And the other, which I particularly liked, her name's Olivia, but she's in the record books as O.J. Magno. Last name spelled M-A-G-N-O. So if you swap the G and the N, she becomes a kind of juice. Remember, like when you were growing up, all of those Prima Poppers would be orange and mango juice? Yeah, I don't know why that was the combo, but they were mad for orange and mango.
Oh, I still now, when I see orange and mango in the supermarket, I think about happy days at my grandparents' house as a little boy. So you're absolutely right there.
So those are the only 3 for nones in women's ODIs. Dane's got the only 4 for none. Although a place that you will find some 3 for nones or better is in Women's T20 International, since they opened up the stats to all competing countries about a year and a bit, no, 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
So there've been 10 occasions in women's T20s where someone's taken 3 for none or more. That includes a 5 for none for Tanzania against Mali and a 6 for none for Nepal against the Maldives. But one of the players who took 3 for none is Nicole Monteiro of Brazil, who took it against Chile in 2019 in Lima, the birthplace of former England captain Freddie Brown. So, Andrew Gilberto, there is a very tenuous link to Brazilian cricket, which we will talk about at more length very shortly.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. That's good. I like all of that. I would just note that Joe Root took a 2 for none, and at one stage in the third Test match against India, at one stage he had 3 for none, and that sent statisticians into hysterics. So, this is going to happen. He's going to finish with 3 for none alongside Richie Benaud, but he kept bowling and finished with 5 for 8. So, looking forward to finding out from Andrew what that is. Next up, we have Jono Halen, who's been contributing to the show in more ways than one of late. You can listen to Storytime for more on that. Jono has sent through 247.
Yep, 247, and Jono has been providing us with updates on the career of Jodie Hicks, which is very appreciated. So the author of Hicks Watch, he sent you a clue, Adam, as well, quite a detailed clue. A series-specific number, says Jono, an admirable series for a player still in his first year as a Test cricketer against a team on a streak. As a 16-year-old, I loved watching this player take on Australia at their best. While he had a turbulent tour, his good moments were enjoyable as they were all under pressure. Adam may envy this man as he had a great view of a Test match hat-trick. From his efforts in cricket post-career, his efforts in the community are to be commended as he continues fighting the good fight politically. What have you got?
Yes, he ends by saying, dare I say, he's one of us. Insert Sam Seaborn handwriting, the West Wing final word crossover.
That's
going
a joke that I don't
again.
get that you do.
No, that's fine. Look, okay, so where I first thought, what I first thought of was, I went the politically progressive route, and who fits into that category? I kind of thought Mark Ramprakash, on the basis that he made his debut in 1991 against a team on a streak, that being the West Indies, having not lost a series since 1981 or something like that. And then he came to Australia in the summer of 1990-91. I mean, none of it quite works, but, the point here is that I thought that might have been where he was going, but, none of the numbers quite tallied, and I had to look further afield. I also thought because he was in the team with Darren Gough when Gough took his hat-trick in Australia in 1999, the non-striker was Shane Warne for that hat-trick, amusingly enough. But no, we were the wrong country, and Jeff, you got me back on track. You're like, it must be something to do with the streak that Australia were on leading into, Calcutta 2001, a Test match that finished on this day. Maybe it was yesterday, 20 years ago. 20 years ago this week, yeah. So, but that streak got to 16. And the West Indies, bless them, they ran headfirst into that in the summer of 2001 when they were doomed from the get-go, really. They arrived and got pumped at the Gabba, as teams often do, but this was particularly brutal. And then they went to Perth for the second Test match. They had to bat first, and an hour into the first morning, they were 5 for 22. Glenn McGrath taking a hat trick in the ninth over of the Test match, drawing. Well, they went from 2 for 19 to 4 for 19. Now down the other end. So, who was watching that hat trick? The non-striker was a man by the name of Wavell Hines, who my brother always liked growing up. My brother would always like Wavell. And he made it to a half century in those very trying circumstances that John O'Halen's referring to, 50 from 87 balls after walking in at number 3. It didn't make a difference in the end. They get pumps. They lose the series 5-0. But he made 247, our Nerd Pledge number, at 31 for the tour. He made another half century in the final Test. He made 70 and 46 at the SCG. All up, Wavell Hines played in 45 Test matches between 2000 and 2005. His career finished in Australia in that tour that they played 5 years on. He made 5 Test centuries, 5 one-day international centuries as well. But the political hook here is that since 2012, Wavell Hines was the boss of the West Indies Players Union. So that's the political fellow traveller reference that he was making there. And in terms of being a good human more generally, he's also heavily committed now in the Paralympics movement. He's the chief de mission for Jamaica for the 2024 edition of the Paralympic Games. So Wavell Hines, he was I remember him being a gutsy player as well, who had a nice strong swinging arc across as a left-hander. Could hit through the line beautifully. A couple of those contributions in 2000, 2001 were noteworthy on a very tough tour where he made 247 runs and still doing good things for the community and for sport. Thank you, John O'Haley.
Yeah, that sounds like a very convincing answer. I think he's also involved in politics in Jamaica now. I reckon he's stood for election to, I'm not sure at what sort of level, if it's a kind of local level or a more national level, or indeed how deep the levels go in Jamaican politics. It's not a very big place. That is something I will admit to knowing nothing about, but I do remember seeing something about him running for election, maybe not that long ago even. Anyway, that's a vague thought, but I think he is involved politically, so that sounds convincing. Right, one more number for today from Sukrit Munjal, $5.71. The little clue, the little couplet reads, think India while solving this riddle. Fastest to 50, still ridiculed a lot. I have something the god never got. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, fastest to 50. Fastest to 50 what? Is it fastest to 50 test wickets? Because that was Ravichandran Ashwin in 9 test matches. Fastest test 50 scored for India was by Kapil Dev, but neither of those were players that have been ridiculed, really. Someone who was ridiculed, Adam, and probably still is, Ajit Agarkar, who we've talked about his streak of ducks in Test cricket before. He's, when you work in this kind of area like we do, and you get sent random stuff from like PR agencies and so on. I got an email that was for sign up for an online maths course with Ajit Agarkar, and I was like, "What is the lesson like? What's 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0?" But I decided not to put that on the internet. But here we are. I've just said it in the podcast. So the streak of ducks actually started as early as his second career test match, unfortunately for him. But the first innings, he batted really nicely for an hour and a half, made 19, put on a partnership of 46, good number 8 test sort of stuff. And then after that, the Ducks began 5 in a row. Golden duck, golden duck, golden duck, golden duck, second ball duck. Played a few tests against other teams, and then a year and a half later in Mumbai, faced Australia again and made a pair to make it 7 in a row against Australia.
Yeah, I remember one of those ducks well. It was the second innings at Melbourne, so that would have been that week we keep coming back to on Storytime, isn't it? That final week of 1999, where I reckon he faced 20 balls and the pressure was building and the whole MCG was all over him, and then he holed out to Mark Waugh bowling part-time off spin. So that was a memorable one. And then the Mumbai pair to finish it off. And I don't think he played in Calcutta or no. Chennai. I think that was his last test match. Well, obviously, he came back and played.
Was taking the new ball in Calcutta.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it continued, like you say. He still had a career against Australia and won a test match for them in 03-04. But I'm sure you'll tell us about that in a sec.
Indeed, Sourav Ganguly got Michael Slater out for 46 in Calcutta, I reckon. I think you'll find. My brain just told me that.
I'll take your word for it.
True. Bowling with the new ball, a little bit of outswing. So anyway, in between the 5 ducks and the 2 ducks, in between those times, in December 2000, he just so happened to stroll out and make India's fastest ever one-day half-century. To this day, it remains India's fastest ever one-day half-century, which is remarkable in the T20 era. So off 21 balls against a decent Zimbabwe side, that good early 2000s Zim side at Rajkot, he made 67 from 25 balls in the end, 4 sixes, 7 fours. And then in July 2002, he got what the god never got, what Sachin Tendulkar never got, which was a test century at Lord's. Made 109 not out in the 4th innings, batting for a draw. Didn't quite seal the match out, but did a good job. And a postscript to that is that later the same year, after making the Test 100, he made 95 in a one-day game against the Windies. He got promoted to first drop. He came in at the fall of the first wicket. Sourav Ganguly said, why not? He's seeing him well. So he came in, he smashed 95 off 101 balls, set them up a nice target, and then the West Indies were chasing it. Ramnaresh Sawan made 80-odd. And Ajit Gurkha was bowling the final over of the match and conceded a boundary from the last delivery of the match when they had 3 to defend, and they lost the game. So poor old Ajit, he missed out on the 100 and didn't quite get to close out the game. But
that's it. I wonder whether he was. Just to come back to that one day international, he might have been in that really interesting category of players who got promoted to pinch hit in that era. So sort of around the late 90s, we often think about Shane Warne, I should say, in the quarterfinal of the 96 World Cup. Brendan Julian. I mean, Jason Gillespie was doing it in South Africa in 1997. I was talking to Jared Kimber about this the other day, the sorts of things that Jared and I talk about, sad as it is. But maybe Ajit Gurkha was a pinch hitter, but then he went on to have a strike rate of less than 100, which is, I suppose, unusual given the job, but he still made 95. What a day.
I mean, he was pretty much a runner ball. He was 95 off 101, so he was close enough to a runner ball. And at the time, that was fast. Like, that was the match reports say that he blazed a 95 and so on. Like, they're really impressed. You know, it wasn't 95 off 138 or whatever. What was some of the highlights from one of those early 90s games with Booney bringing up, with Jeff Marsh bringing up 50 off 110 balls?
Yeah.
Saluting the crowd, taking the shine off it.
Yeah, that one day international was on our on one of the subscription services over here until recently, and I alerted Nick Tuvey, a friend of the show, to the fact that it's on YouTube, and he live tweeted the entire game the other day, which was the 91-92 final at Sydney, one day final against India. But yes, Jeff Marsh getting a standing ovation for a half century and 110 balls, which gives you a bit of a sense of what one day cricket was like in the 90s.
I think Ravi Shastri did the same in the reply. He was opening in the reply. I reckon it was 50 off about 100. Anyway, all of this is to say, why was Sukrit Munjal's Nerd Pledge number $5.71 when wanting to link it to Ajit Gurkha? That is the total number of career test runs that Gurkha scored in his 26 test matches at an average of 16.79, which is the 10th lowest test average for a batsman to have made a test century. And that is your number, Sukrit Munjal. Thank you all for your Nerd Pledge numbers. If you want to play the game, very easy. Go to patreon.com/thefinalword, make an account, put the number in. We'll see the number. We'll put it on the list. We'll do it on the show. Couldn't be easier. And you will help us keep making the show week to week.
That you will. Jeff, before we go to our... Is that just going to be our break, Jeff? Sorry, mate. I was just scrolling through Visolio. Sorry about this, Ashton. I was trying to scroll through to find Zolio stuff, but I don't know what I was doing. So should we just go now? Should I now say something like... I'll throw it to the ad. Yep, okay. Beautifully done, Jeff. Okay, time for us to take a break. To grab a cup of tea, maybe, if that's what you like doing before listening to an interview, which we have coming up with the Brazilian national captain, Roberta Moretti, and the head of Cricket Brazil, Matt Featherston. Jeff, it's that time again to talk about a little satellite device that's close to both of our hearts. It's called the Zolio.
It's the Zolio. Whoa, whoa. It is. It's literally close to my heart. I'm holding it right now, the Zolio, in my hand. You'd be able to see that on a video, but not on a podcast. That's how the audio medium works. You know me, Adam. Pretty adventurous guy. Love to get out in the great outdoors. You know, I love love some trekking, some hiking.
The one time I've sent you off on a hike, this is probably a story worth telling. So after the sandpaper test came to its natural conclusion, Australia losing in 4 days, it meant that we had this day that we didn't expect to have, the 5th day, because the test didn't feel like it was going to finish in 4 days, and then of course it did. And it was a fairly rugged couple of days for us professionally. We were doing interviews around the clock, writing articles for seemingly every publication around the world. But our colleague, or I suppose on that tour, my colleague for radio was Adam Voges, who was working with us. And of course, he didn't have any commitments on day 5. He was just hanging around waiting for the 4th test match to start. So at the bar, he said something to us like, "Oh, I want to go and climb at Table Mountain tomorrow, and you'd hinted to me at some point along the week. You said, I wouldn't mind trying to possibly maybe climb Table Mountain, but I might get a cable car up there. And I'm like, no, you should do it. Rachel and I have done it.
I
I've
wanted
done it
to
before.
get on top of Table Mountain. Mountain. I didn't necessarily want to walk up there, but
I'd done it before the test, and I'd done it before, and I knew how what a beautiful thing it is to do. And I kind of thought, I know you're not a man of peak physical fitness. You haven't got great aerobic capacity, shall we say? Great lung capacity, fantastic lung capacity. That much must be said. But you're more the broader aerobic side of things isn't really your bag. So Voguesy's saying I want to go up Table Mountain. You having said it to me, I played matchmaker. Next morning, first thing, you're climbing up a mountain with a man who, until a few months earlier, was a professional athlete. How did that go for you?
Look, it was. It went okay for me because we went at my pace. It probably didn't go so well for him because it took him about 4 hours longer than he was anticipating. But he was very patient. Just waited for me at every turn. And if you'd said, like, who are the super fit cricketers, you kind of David Warner types and so on, you wouldn't necessarily have thought of Adam Voges as being a supreme athlete. He sort of batted a bit and potted around out there, but my lord, he was fast up that mountain. And so that does link to this, because if we had got lost while going up that mountain, had we been lost and had we had Azolio, we would have been able to send a text-based message or an email to anyone anywhere in the world saying that we were lost. We'd also be able to, I'm going to take this to the camera because why not, see this SOS little flap there, and you open it and there's a red button that says SOS. That is not a button that you press and Sean Marsh appears. That is a button that you press and help will come to you. It's not to say that Sean Marsh couldn't help. Sean Marsh might be there if Sean Marsh was.
He was there in Cape Town, I'm sure.
Yeah, when they pressed the SOS button. In 2014, after a couple of early wickets, and he came in and made 148, he was responding to that SOS. So there's the emergency function, or there's just the you just want to chat to someone because you're on top of Table Mountain and you don't have any phone reception because you're a tourist and you don't have a local phone number. And so what the magic little box does is it turns your phone into a satellite phone, it connects it to the satellite network, and then you can just text anyone in the world. It's free. Once you've signed up your little plan, you send the messages for free, emails, texts, anywhere in the world, from anywhere in the world, off your own phone. Magic.
It is. There's a way of going over Table Mountain and continuing and sort of camping all the way across the top from one end to the other. And I believe it takes like 8 days or something like that. You'd want to have a Zolio for that. You'd also want to have a Zolio if you were going to join us on the Final Word Cricket Tour, which has a new destination after today. But next year, we're going to go to Pakistan somehow, one way or another. We're going to go to Pakistan, and we're going to go and play some cricket over there. And I'm telling you, we're going to pack a Zolio or two for that adventure because we might get right off the beaten track. So get one now. Why wait until you're playing with the Final Word 11? Why wait until you're being dragged into a cricket game many miles from anywhere? Get one now, Zolio.com, and do the preparatory work in 2021.
If you want to be able to text someone from the dance floor of the Dera Ismail Khan disco, you are going to need a Zolio. It may not have a revolving floor like Frankston. I cannot speak to that. I don't know yet what the disco will look like. But when you're over there, you'll want to be able to send a text. That's all I'm saying. And if you have this, you can send that text from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. Zoleo.com. They make a good thing. Go and have a look.